What if you only had to plant your garden once? No replanting every spring. No buying seeds every year. No starting over after a hard winter. Just plant once and then spend the rest of your life harvesting. That's not a fantasy. That's exactly how millions of people around the world have been gardening for centuries. And it's how the smartest gardeners today are building food systems that produce more every year than the year before, from soil that most people would look at and say nothing will grow there. Today I'm going to show you 15 crops that you plant once and never have to plant again. Some of them come back every spring without you doing a single thing. Some of them spread and multiply on their own. Some of them produce for 30, 50, even 100 years from a single planting. Stay until the end because the last crop on this list is one most people have never grown, produces more food per square foot than almost anything else, and does it in the worst soil you have. Welcome to the Quiet Garden. Let's get into it. Crop 15, chives. We're starting simple, because the best perennial gardens are built one plant at a time, and chives are the perfect first step. Plant chives once in any corner of your garden, even in a pot, even in rocky poor soil, even in partial shade, and they will come back every single year without fail. They multiply slowly and steadily, forming larger and larger clumps over time. Every spring the fresh green shoots push up before almost anything else in the garden is growing. Every summer the purple flowers open and the bees come. You harvest by cutting the leaves an inch above the ground. Within days, new growth appears. You can cut chives 4, 5, 6 times in a single season and the plant simply keeps producing. The more you cut, the more it grows. The leaves go into everything: eggs, potatoes, soups, salads, sauces, butter. The flowers are edible and beautiful, scattered over a dish or infused into vinegar for a bright pink condiment that costs nothing to make. A clump of chives left in the ground through winter will divide and spread naturally. What starts as one small plant becomes a colony of dozens over a few years, all from a single original planting. Share divisions with neighbors. Fill containers. Edge garden beds. Chives are one of the most forgiving, most productive, most generous plants in the perennial garden. Crop 14, sorrel. Sorrel is the perennial salad green that most gardeners in the modern world have completely forgotten about, and once you grow it, you'll wonder how you ever managed without it. French sorrel and garden sorrel both grow as perennial clumps that return every year, producing large quantities of leaves from very early spring through late autumn. The leaves have a bright, sharp, lemony flavor from natural oxalic acid, the same tang that makes rhubarb interesting, and they work in salads, soups, sauces, and as a sharp finishing green on any dish that needs lift. In French cooking, sorrel sauce is a classic, a simple sauce of wilted sorrel leaves and cream that pairs with salmon, eggs, or chicken. It's extraordinary, and the only reason most people don't make it is that sorrel isn't in supermarkets because it wilts quickly after cutting and doesn't survive commercial distribution. Which is exactly why you grow it yourself. Sorrel plants establish easily from seed or division, grow in almost any soil including poor, clay-heavy, or slightly acidic ground, and ask for almost nothing once they're in. A mature sorrel plant is almost impossible to kill. It goes dormant in deep winter and comes back reliably every spring, larger than the year before. The roots go deep, finding water and nutrients in soil that discourages shallower plants. One plant gives you leaves for decades. Crop 13, rhubarb. Rhubarb is one of the great workhorses of the perennial garden and one of the most underappreciated crops most people have access to. Plant rhubarb crowns once in a prepared spot, ideally with some compost worked in, though rhubarb will push through poor soil once established, and they will come back every year for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years or more. The crowns get larger every year. The stalks get thicker. The harvest gets bigger. A plant that gives you 10 stalks in its first year gives you 50 in its fifth. The first rule of rhubarb is patience. Don't harvest at all in the first year. Harvest lightly in the second, and then let it go in year 3 and beyond. That patience is rewarded with a plant that becomes more productive every single season without any further investment. Rhubarb tolerates cold with complete indifference. It pushes up in early spring when almost nothing else in the garden is producing. That earliness, that ability to give you something to harvest in April when the rest of the garden is still waking up, makes it invaluable. Rhubarb crumble, rhubarb jam, rhubarb compote, rhubarb in savory chutneys with ginger and orange. The uses run far beyond the obvious strawberry pairing. The leaves are toxic, important to know, but the stalks are the food. Brilliant red, tart, and completely unique. Once you have a rhubarb plant in your garden, you have it for life. Crop 12. Horseradish. Horseradish is the plant that most gardeners who grow it accidentally discover is permanent. You plant it intending to grow it as a crop. You harvest some root. You think you've removed it. The following spring it comes back from a tiny fragment of root left in the ground, as vigorous as ever. Most gardeners find this frustrating. The ones who understand what they have find it wonderful. Horseradish is essentially impossible to remove once established, which means it is essentially impossible to fail at growing it. Plant it once, anywhere, in clay, in poor soil, in a neglected corner, and it will be there every year without exception. The roots are what you harvest. Grated fresh horseradish has a heat and intensity that the prepared sauce in jars cannot come close to matching. Fresh grated horseradish mixed with a little vinegar, and salt is a completely different ingredient from anything commercial. It clears the sinuses, wakes up every taste receptor, and transforms a simple piece of beef or smoked fish into something memorable. Beyond the kitchen, horseradish has a long history as a medicinal plant. The fresh root contains volatile compounds with significant antibacterial properties. Traditional herbalists used it for sinus congestion, respiratory infections, and urinary tract issues. The heat that makes it interesting food is also what makes it effective medicine. Planted in a contained area, a raised bed with sides, or a large container sunk into the ground if you want to keep it from spreading, or give it a corner it can have. Either way, you will never need to plant it again. Crop 11. Lovage. Lovage is the forgotten giant of the perennial herb garden. Most people have never grown it. Most people have never eaten it. And almost everyone who discovers it wishes they'd known about it 20 years earlier. Lovage is a tall, robust perennial herb. It can reach 6 feet or more in its second and third year, with large, dark green leaves that smell and taste intensely of celery. Not faintly like celery. Powerfully, deeply, unmistakably like celery, but more complex, more aromatic, more interesting. Every part of the plant is useful. The leaves go into soups, stews, stocks, and salads anywhere you'd use celery. The hollow stems can be used as straws for Bloody Marys and savory drinks. The seeds are a spice, similar to celery seed, but with more depth, used in bread, crackers, and spice blends. The roots are used as a vegetable in some European traditions. Lovage grows in poor soil. It grows in partial shade. It grows in heavy clay, in dry conditions, in spots where other herbs struggle. It comes back every year with no attention, growing larger and more productive each season. A mature lovage plant produces more leaf material than most households can use, which makes it an extraordinary candidate for drying and preserving through winter. Plant 1. Give it space, and you will have a reliable, enormous, deeply useful herb in your garden for the rest of your life. Crop 10. Asparagus. Asparagus requires the most upfront patience of anything on this list. You plant the crowns, you wait 2 full years without harvesting, you let the plant build its root system without interruption. 2 years of waiting. And then you harvest asparagus every spring for 30 years. That is not an exaggeration. Well-established asparagus beds are passed down through families. They outlast the gardeners who planted them. A bed planted today will still be producing for your children. The spring harvest, those first spears pushing through cold soil in April and May, is one of the great seasonal moments in the food garden. Fresh asparagus, cut and eaten the same day, has a sweetness and tenderness that supermarket asparagus, harvested days or weeks before you buy it, simply cannot replicate. The sugars in asparagus convert to starch rapidly after cutting. Freshness is everything, which is another way of saying that growing your own asparagus gives you something that cannot be bought. After the harvest window, usually 4 to 6 weeks, you let the spears grow into their tall, feathery fronds. Those fronds feed the roots all summer and autumn, building the energy the plant needs to produce the following spring. Cut the fronds back in late autumn. Mulch lightly. Walk away. Come back in April. Do that for 30 years, and the asparagus will still be there. Crop 9. Jerusalem artichoke. Jerusalem artichoke, also called sunchoke, has nothing to do with Jerusalem and nothing to do with artichokes. It's a native North American plant in the sunflower family that produces knobbly, potato-like tubers underground and tall yellow flowers above ground that attract pollinators from across the garden. The tubers taste like a mild, nutty, slightly sweet cross between a potato and an artichoke heart. They can be eaten raw, roasted, sautéed, or made into soup. The flavor is genuinely excellent. The reason Jerusalem artichoke belongs on this list, above almost any other crop, is what it does in poor soil. Jerusalem artichoke grows in conditions that would stop most vegetables in their tracks: compacted soil, clay, gravel, neglected ground that hasn't been cultivated in years. It pushes through, grows vigorously, produces abundantly, and comes back the following year from any tuber fragment left in the ground, which is always some of them, no matter how thoroughly you harvest. Like horseradish, once you plant Jerusalem artichoke, it is effectively permanent. This is both its great quality and the thing that makes gardeners cautious. Give it a dedicated space, because it will fill that space completely and resist all attempts to leave. The yield from a small area is extraordinary. A 4 by 4 foot patch can produce 30 to 50 pounds of tubers. They store in the ground through winter and are harvested as needed. The cold actually improves their flavor. Crop 8. Egyptian walking onion. This is the one most people have never heard of, and the one that tends to create the most surprise when they see what it does. Egyptian walking onions, also called tree onions or top-setting onions, are a perennial onion that produces clusters of small bulbils at the top of tall hollow stems instead of flowering normally. Those bulbils are too heavy for the stem to support. The stem bends, the bulbils touch the ground, and they plant themselves. The onion walks. Over time, a single plant moves slowly across the garden bed, planting new generations of itself as it goes. A single original plant becomes a spreading colony. You never replant. You simply harvest from the outside of the colony while the center continues spreading. The green tops are used like chives or green onions all through spring and summer. The underground bulbs are used like small onions or shallots. The top-set bulbils can be used like very small onions, pickled, roasted whole, or used in any dish where a concentrated onion flavor is wanted. Egyptian walking onions are cold-hardy to extreme temperatures, disease-resistant, and productive across almost any soil type. They have been growing in cottage gardens and homestead plots for centuries, quietly feeding families who understood that the best garden plant is one that takes care of itself. Crop 7. Turkish rocket. Turkish rocket, Bunias orientalis, is one of the great overlooked perennial vegetables, and almost nobody outside specialist foraging and permaculture circles knows it exists. It is a large, vigorous perennial plant that emerges very early in spring, sometimes pushing through snow, with leaves that can be eaten as a cooked green, young flower shoots that are harvested and eaten like broccoli, and a general usefulness across the hungry gap between winter and the summer garden that is deeply practical. The flavor is strong and slightly mustardy. It belongs to the brassica family, and it works best lightly steamed or sautéed with butter and garlic. The young flower shoots, harvested just before they open, are genuinely delicious. Many people who try them prefer them to broccoli. Turkish rocket grows in poor, dry, well-drained soil where brassicas would struggle. It tolerates drought. It tolerates neglect. It self-seeds readily if you allow any flowers to set seed, meaning it slowly colonizes available ground and expands without any effort from the gardener. A plant established in poor ground that most vegetables would refuse will produce edible greens every spring and flower shoots every year from the same crown, for years and years without replanting. Crop 6. Globe artichoke. Globe artichokes are dramatic, architectural, and almost absurdly productive once established. They grow into large, silvery green plants with enormous divided leaves and tall stems that produce the flower buds, the part we eat in early summer. The buds harvested young, before the flower opens, are the artichoke of the kitchen. Steamed and eaten with butter or yoli, they are one of the great pleasures of the summer table. Let a bud open fully, and it becomes an enormous, intensely purple thistle flower, spectacular enough to be grown purely as an ornamental. Artichokes grow from offsets, small shoots that appear at the base of established plants, and these offsets are how the plant propagates. Every year, a mature plant produces multiple offsets that can be detached and replanted elsewhere or left to fill the available space. Your original planting becomes a group of plants over time, all without buying anything new. In mild climates, artichoke plants are fully perennial. In colder climates, they need mulching in winter but reliably return. Even where they die back hard, the roots often survive to regrow in spring. Poor soil doesn't stop artichokes, though they appreciate some organic matter, and a well-established plant in a suitable position will produce for 10 years or more from a single original planting. Crop 5. Fiddleheads. In early spring, before most of the garden has woken up, ostrich ferns push coiled fronds, fiddleheads, up through the cold soil. Those coiled fronds, harvested when they're still tightly furled and just a few inches tall, are one of the most celebrated spring delicacies in North American and Japanese cuisine. Fiddleheads taste like a cross between asparagus and spinach, with a slight earthiness that is deeply seasonal and completely distinctive. Lightly blanched and sautéed in butter with garlic and lemon, there are few better ways to welcome spring to the table. Ostrich ferns grow in moist, partially shaded conditions, stream banks, woodland edges, the damp shaded side of the garden where little else produces. They spread through underground rhizomes, slowly expanding their colony year after year. What begins as a small planting becomes a large patch over a decade, producing more fiddleheads every spring than the year before. They ask for nothing. They spread themselves. They produce in conditions, shade, moisture, acidic soil, that most food plants reject, and they give you one of the most extraordinary spring harvests in the entire garden. Crop 4. Sea kale. Sea kale crambe maritima grows naturally on coastal shingle beaches, bare gravel, almost no soil, salt spray, wind, the conditions that most plants consider a death sentence. And it thrives. Sea kale has been eaten in Britain and coastal Europe for centuries. The young spring shoots, emerging from the crown in early spring, are blanched, covered to exclude light, which produces pale, tender, sweet growth that tastes like a cross between cabbage and asparagus. The unblanched leaves are used as a cooked green. The flower shoots are eaten like broccoli. The mature plant produces clusters of white flowers that are themselves edible and fragrant. The roots go deep, sometimes several feet, into whatever substrate the plant is growing in, finding water and minerals that shallow-rooted plants cannot reach. This is why sea kale succeeds in poor, dry, stony soil where most vegetables fail immediately. Once established from seed or root cuttings, sea kale produces for 20 years or more from the same crown. It asks for nothing. It survives drought, poor soil, and cold winters with complete indifference. It is one of the most genuinely self-sufficient food plants available to a temperate gardener. Crop 3. Hardy kiwi. When most people think of kiwi fruit, they think of the large, fuzzy, brown-skinned fruit from New Zealand, a subtropical plant that requires warm growing conditions. Hardy kiwi is a completely different beast. Actinidia arguta, the hardy kiwi vine, produces smooth-skinned, grape-sized kiwi fruits that are eaten whole, skin and all, with a flavor more intense and aromatic than the supermarket kiwi, and it is cold hardy to -25 degrees Celsius. It grows in conditions that would kill the commercial kiwi instantly. Hardy kiwi is a vigorous climbing vine that establishes in the first few years, begins producing fruit in 3 to 5 years, and then produces heavily for 50 years or more. A mature, well-established hardy kiwi vine produces more fruit than most families can eat, 20, 30, 40 pounds from a single plant in peak years. It grows in poor soil. It tolerates partial shade. It needs a strong support structure because the vine becomes enormous and productive. Plant a female vine with a male pollinator. One male pollinates up to 8 females, and you have decades of extraordinary fruit production from plants that require almost no maintenance once established. Almost nobody is growing hardy kiwi. The fruit is not commercially produced at scale. The only place most people could ever taste fresh hardy kiwi is from someone who grows their own. Crop 2. Walking onion. This deserves its own place on the list because the combination of Egyptian walking onions, perennial leeks, and Welsh bunching onions creates something more powerful than any single plant. A permanent onion garden that never needs replanting and provides alliums for the kitchen every month of the year. Perennial leeks, Babington's leek in particular, grow like regular leeks but produce bulbils at the top like the walking onion, dropping them to the ground and planting the next generation. They're cold hardy, multiply freely, and have a flavor slightly milder and sweeter than annual leeks. Welsh bunching onions push up reliably from established clumps every spring, multiply through division, never produce a single large bulb but give constant green tops and small bulbs throughout the growing season. Planted together in a dedicated allium bed, even in poor soil, even in partial shade, these 3 plants create a system that produces something harvestable every single week of the year with no replanting, no seed buying, and almost no labor. The permanent allium bed is one of the foundational ideas of the perennial food garden. Once you have it, you cannot imagine managing without it. Crop 1. Turkish hazel. The single most productive perennial food system available to a home grower is not a vegetable. It's not even an herb. It's a tree. Specifically, a well-chosen, appropriately placed food tree, or a small orchard of food trees planted once and managed for life. The numbers are simply incomparable. A single established apple tree produces hundreds of pounds of fruit every autumn for 100 years. A pear tree outlives the gardener who planted it. A plum tree. Once it finds its position, fruits so heavily the branches need support. But the most underplanted and most extraordinary option in cool temperate climates, the one that does it all in the worst possible soil, is the Turkish hazel, Corylus collarna, a large, handsome tree with beautiful bark that produces abundant hazelnuts every autumn without the disease pressure and suckering problems of the common hazel. It grows in heavy clay, in exposed positions, in urban environments with compacted soil. It needs no special care. It does not sucker. It lives for centuries. The nuts it produces are smaller than commercial hazelnuts, but rich in flavor and produced in quantities that fill bags and bowls from a single tree every September. Combined with a multi-grafted apple or pear tree, a single tree with multiple varieties grafted onto one rootstock, producing different fruits at different times, and a few plums or damsons along a sunny fence, a small garden has a permanent, self-sustaining, increasingly productive food system that improves with every passing year. You plant a tree in soil that other crops dismiss. The tree doesn't care. The roots go down further than any annual crop will ever reach. They find the water table. They crack the subsoil. They draw up minerals from 10 feet below. They improve the soil around them as their leaves fall and decompose year after year. And every autumn for the rest of your life, you harvest. The perennial garden is not a shortcut. It requires the same patience as anything worth doing, but it rewards that patience with something no annual crop can ever give you, a system that grows in value, in productivity, and in beauty with every passing year, from a piece of ground that most people looked at and decided wasn't worth planting. It was always worth planting. You just had to choose the right plants. 15 crops, 1 planting, a lifetime of harvesting. Here's the shift in thinking this video is really about. Annual gardening, the cycle of seeds, seedlings, planting, harvest, and starting over, is how most of us were taught to grow food. And there's nothing wrong with it. But perennial gardening is the approach that rewards you more every year instead of the same every year. Every season, a perennial plant is older, more established, more deeply rooted, and more productive than the last. The work you put in today compounds. The garden gets better while you're not looking. Start with 1 plant from this list. The easiest entry point is chives. Plant them this week anywhere and you've started. Add sorrel next spring. Plant an asparagus crown and practice the patience it teaches. Put in a fruit tree and think about the person who will be harvesting it in 50 years. The best time to plant a perennial garden was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If this video gave you 1 plant to think about differently, share it with someone who gardens. Leave a comment with the crop that surprised you most. And if you haven't subscribed to Deep Root Wisdom yet, every video on this channel is built on this same idea. The knowledge that makes growing food simpler, richer, and more worth doing. See you in the next one.
So hello guys, this is Raman and welcome to our channel The Quick Garden, where we will post the videos about weeds, plants and everything. So hope you will like the every video being posted in this channel, and thank you so much.